This is LeiLani Cauthen, your host from Learning Counsel, News, Media, and Research. Glad to have you with us today. Our conversation for today, Activity H8, is reducing teacher burdens with software mechanism. This is a big, robust topic for schools right now, because when the pandemic happened, everybody scrambled to build digitally, and often that was not with very sophisticated things. It was, Google Docs or Microsoft. It's a lot of work. It's a lot of manual work, and there's a lot of manual back and forth, like emailing everyone and getting everything back, and then, what do I do with it all, and all that kind of stuff. So really, what we're going to be looking at today is the advanced software mechanisms in the more professional grade stuff. We can start to say to ourselves, hey, we should make sure that we have those mechanisms in our software so that we can reduce the teacher burden so they don't all go crazy. Wendy will share with us the professional grade side of what Edison is doing right now, so we can sort of be anchored with that. So I'm going to give it over to you right now.
Hey, thank you, LeiLani. And thank you so much for including us and letting us be part of the discussion. I was sharing actually before we started with Terry how much that I have learned being part of these discussions. So it's a lot of excitement and it's fun, and I really appreciate the opportunity to contribute and be involved. I am the Chief Learning Officer at EdisonLearning. EdisonLearning has been around almost 3 decades, believe it or not, and we have been providing content to teachers in schools, working with partners with districts, and also we have an instructional services team that teaches and specializes in online and blended instruction. Edison has over approximately 150 courses in grades 6 through 12. And like LeiLani said, it's the professional grade. So you have to think of it as software, which is very different when you're developing software. We have instructional designers, subject matter experts, artists, all kinds of fun people on staff that are very creative and put things together for students. So we're really excited to be here today. We are actually, I know we have a lot of terms to go through, so LeiLani will just wait and show some examples as we go through those terms. And then through that, we can clarify what EdisonLearning does.
Okay, perfect. I'm just going to show these couple of screenshots of your system so people can sort of see that and how that sort of operates, kind of within professional grade. Notice it has a WYSIWYG, what you see is what you get, keyboard embedded and all that other kind of stuff. And I see CJ Barry has joined us. CJ, you're the principal in Eastlake High in Colorado.
Yes, ma'am, I am. Thank you for waiting for me. I apologize. We're having some fun with our kids today.
I can believe it. We're hearing that all across the nation. So we're always surprised when we even see an educator again, because we know you guys are all, taking a barrage of things happening constantly. But it's exciting to have you, and we're looking forward to this whole conversation.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Yeah. So CJ, do you want to give us a little background on what's happening in Colorado for you trying to run a high school right now? And what it means to you also to, try to reduce teacher burden with software mechanisms?
Sure, definitely. Well, again, thank you for inviting me. I do apologize. I don't have a computer with a camera right now, but that's part of what we're dealing with when it comes to software and things like that, when it comes to my my online experience. But here in Colorado Springs, I'm personally at an AEC, or an alternative education campus. We service kids ages 16 to 21 for a high school diploma and GED prep. And we were very, very lucky that prior to COVID, we were already a one-to-one school. So when that hit, we were able to immediately get Chromebooks out to students and to staff and set them up with home offices. So we were very, very lucky on that. However, we prior to COVID, we chose our curriculum to ensure that it was more of a blended learning model. And when we went strictly online, that's where we started getting stumped when it came to kind of supports for technology for our staff. A lot of our staff are savvy on most types of technology, but not enough of them. It's the idea behind kids that can use a cell phone. It doesn't mean that they can create a Google Doc or they can, access Google Calendar just because they can type some emojis on a social media platform. They are two completely different learning curves. So that's what we've been trying to help our staff with, especially, is finding software and programs that can bridge that gap for the students so that the teachers don't get frustrated too quickly. And like always, we say every piece of technology was made by a human, so it is fallible. So our teachers are just learning how to deal with the frustration of the network going down, or Google saying, no, you can't access this today and you need it, so.
Yeah. Did you find at one point you wanted to be more prescriptive, CJ, just we're going to use this math program or that language thingy, because otherwise you're going to have to build everything yourself? Did you find that sort of got into your mind along the way?
We tried that a long time ago. However, because our kids come to us with so many different deficiencies in multiple areas of their learning, it's just too hard. We end up building their learning pathway individual, whether we like it or not, which is fine. We love doing that. We're a very small school. We only have an enrollment of 116. So we keep it small on purpose so that we can individualize that learning pathway, but it is very time consuming. So it's worth it to find software and curriculum that helps build that. And we have found a couple, since COVID that help us.
Okay, so let's go into the mechanisms conversation. I know my team's trying to still find Maureen, and we'll make sure that everyone else is unmuted to pipe up if they want to. So we're going to start with mechanisms as a definition. Let me just go to that document so we can start with the document. Mechanisms within software are processes or techniques. They're generally longer than actions. So if you think about an action in software, it's kind of like a switch, versus a mechanism is something that's doing some sort of mini process of something. So the first one here we have is animated plotting. If you've seen the products that actually present students with mini pre-built animations, they can sort of drag and drop in comic book looking things. This is a new mechanism for students to provide proof of learning. So any comments we want to make on this definition, or should we skate on by because we have quite a few to get through today? No comments? Going once, going twice. Oh, we talked a little bit about artificial intelligence in earlier events. AI is typically not something I want to get too far into. A lot of people don't really understand it. They just know that they want it. They would like to have more AI doing things for them. So with that said, I'm just going to, again, go on to the next one. So auto calendaring, you go, can we have a meeting with somebody? And then it's like, okay, well, I got to send you a calendar invite. What time do you want? Okay, I can't do that time. It's like all this back and forth, right? So this is the hot technology area that's really being desired by a lot of people in education, putting on all of your classes calendar at the same time. Sometimes this is something you can do in an LMS. Sometimes it isn't. CJ, is this something that you run into, especially with parent meetings?
It is, especially the larger the team, the harder it is to calendar. So when it comes to SPED meetings, you end up having not only the SPED teacher, but the general ed teacher. Usually have an elective teacher, you have an administrator, you have the psych, you have therapists, the parent, the student themselves, because we have young adults, so yes, this is a huge issue that we have to deal with.
Well, I will mention that this technology does work in the commercial world already, but it has this one drawback, and that is you have to opt in to share your existing calendar. In other words, your calendar has to be able to have the artificial intelligence behind auto calendaring look at your calendar and look at everybody else's calendars trying to create a meeting, and then send the invitations and see how many respond. If there's still a glitch and you have to have if you set it so everybody must attend, it could be really great. But now if you're talking about parents, you're going to be asking them to opt in to share their personal calendar. This is where it's going to get sticky for schools. Just saying. Unless, well, all that you're going to ask them for is portions. I only want to know blocks that are available. I don't want to know your calendar. So those are the issues. So auto cohorting and grouping. This is something that's inside a lot of software where it says, let's watch student progress. And CJ, I'd love for you to speak up about this. Let's watch their progress and then preset pathways on group pace. You know, like maybe there's a lecture in the lesson sequence. So as students are pacing through, it's like they'll trigger the lecture because 30 of them have now arrived or whatever. This is also true inside a lot of the language learning software. You know, auto cohorts you based on your reading or Lexile level and some of the math software. Given what you guys do, trying to customize, what are your thoughts on this definition?
We definitely looked for an assessment software that did that. We found a great testing software where they break the students into what we call RIT levels, or response to intervention levels. And from that, during COVID, when we were 100% remote, we actually created our student calendars by cohorting by their academic level. So the kids at a certain level all met with a teacher at a certain time together so that they could work together. So yeah, we did use this for our calendaring or for our Google Meet groups.
Okay. You know, LeiLani, when I like auto cohorting and grouping, I almost wonder if there should be a distinction, because this is being done through artificial intelligence, right, through the technology. But in the law,
sometimes it's manual, like CJ just said. Sometimes they have to manually group.
Okay, that's what I was going to say. Sometimes in a lot of platforms you can group, and you can do that by hand, like CJ said, like with ability grouping. You can choose, and we have that in our platform, like which students you want to work together. But I think almost that there's a distinction between the two that needs to be made, LeiLani.
Yeah, I think we need another definition. So I'm noting that now. You have your class, here's your roster, and it's just a blob. You know, there's no sub-segmenting. I also want to invite, I think Donald Wallers, you're on the line right now. If you want to unmute and join the conversation, we would love to welcome you in. I'm looking at D-Man, who just joined, who's actually not D-Man, it's Maureen. Hi, Maureen, you're under an alias. It's super fun and mysterious. I just want to introduce you really quickly, then we'll stop the conversation for a second and just make sure we get to know you a little bit more as a group.
Sure, I apologize. I'm only going to be here for a short time because, you know, there are emergencies.
Okay.
So I'm Maureen Miller. I'm the Director of Instructional Technology for Oak Park and River Forest High School. I am just starting in this role this year. I've been a Director of Technology, and I've been a Learning Coordinator in Curriculum, and always a techie person. So I've been at this for over 20 years.
Yeah, and I'm sorry to hear there's emergencies, but I'm not surprised, because I am hearing that from a lot of superintendents right now. All right, so we're kind of working through mechanisms. Since we're only going to have you for a brief time, I just want to ask, you know, top of mind for you, mechanism use. We talked about animated plotting, artificial intelligence, mechanisms overall, and we're down into auto cohorting and grouping.
Well, I'm sorry to say I don't really have much to add to that other than the nightmare of calendaring, because I'm actually in my new role, I'm managing 4 different spaces. I have a makerspace, a library, the bookstore, and a cohort of teachers called the Instructional Technology team. So it's hard for us to find spaces for everyone because we're also under construction. So I'm actually looking more for solutions than coming to you with an answer.
Well, we'll just kind of work through a few of these while we have you then, and just say, okay, here's what we're seeing come out of the professional grade world, and start to, you know, mechanize more of the, you know, flat repositories that are just sort of documenting things around, which actually is really what the complaints have been. The complaints have been, I got to email everybody, get the emails all back. I got to answer all the questions. It's a lot.
Well, I will tell you one thing that I'm in the process of working on right now, and that's,
Mhm.
you know, we're open full all day, not hybrid, but we have kids that are quarantining. So I'm sure every school
Oh.
district in the country is working with how they're communicating with these quarantine kids, how they're going to be supported outside of school for the duration of the quarantine, and what the back and forth is with that, because it could be numerous emails to parents, to the tutor, to the extra support people, and to whoever, and to all the classroom teachers. So we're sticking with Google Classroom to kind of, as they call it an LMS, but it's not. We all know it's not an LMS, but that's what they use. So what we've done is, for all these kids quarantining, we have a spreadsheet that the nurses drop them into, and then I've automated the spreadsheet using Autocrat and Formule. So we do mail merges that will automatically send the parents a link to the kids' classroom, who their teacher is, who their counselor is, and a link to their meetings and how to sign up. So all those directions that could have been a back and forth will now live in that one triggered spreadsheet. And the students by grade level will each go to their Google Classroom. So they all have a space to be, and they know who the people are, who the adults are that will be checking in with them.
Okay, so you've brought order at least in the navigational direction for everybody.
Yes, I hope.
Awesome. That's awesome. Okay. So let's go back to also, Donald, do you want to introduce yourself? Because Donald, I know you're also on the line.
Hello, I'm the STEM supervisor, K-12 for Ewing Public Schools.
Okay, great. Well, nice to have you. Pipe up as much as you can. As we get through this work, we're going to kind of try to go fast. All right, so we talked about auto-correcting grouping. Autocorrect, this is a software mechanism that's in software, but there is dialogue with different language teachers that don't really want that. So they want to be able to toggle it off so that students are forced to actually correct themselves rather than use them built into the software that auto corrects their spelling and that kind of stuff. Any comments on this definition from anyone? Okay, going once, going twice. All right, going to auto intersection. So this is the point when software, you're learning along and it would automatically formulate or give you an assessment after a certain period of learning to determine your mastery or awareness, knowledge, skills attained, or final grade. It's not something that's in the flat repository systems. It's usually built into the professional grade as it's auto triggered based on pace. So do we want to comment on auto intersection?
LeiLani, is it
Or it's,
well, it says final grade. That makes me think it's a summative assessment. But to determine mastery of knowledge makes me think it's a formative assessment. Should we clarify that it could be both, or what's intended there?
I think the word or here would be a both thing.
Okay.
But we could put in formative here. A formative. But I don't know, based on the last EduJedi work, if this is actually a good definition, because auto intersection could be with anything, you know?
Yeah.
You're auto intersecting to have a meeting because you just, you know, failed at one thing 16 times. And you need to now have a teacher meeting because they need to help you figure out fractions, right? So I think that I'm going to make a note that this needs to be worked on as a definition to make it more clear. All right, so moving on, automating, translation service for handwriting. There are schools right now that aren't teaching handwriting anymore. A software mechanism that translates handwriting can be embedded in a lot of systems. Is this something that we want to work on the definition or leave it alone? Okay, going once, going twice. Zach, you're shaking your head. You're like, oh, no. Okay, blogging. This is really popular. So online personal blogging of your learning journey is one of the new agency things. Any comments that we want to make on blogging? Maureen, CJ?
No, my use of blogging is limited. I had an English teacher that tried it, but the kids just didn't pick up on it very well. So, yeah, no.
Okay. Okay, so going on to coding, I would imagine this is something big for you, Donald, because you're in the STEM arena. Computer language script. This coding is just, this is just a definition of coding. We're not getting too much into this definition into where it's used or how it's used. Do we need to build out this definition?
No, it's huge. One of the big things we're doing now is organizing a K-12 growth in it.
Okay, so I'm going to leave it for now, but I'm making a note that we might have to inspect this definition. Okay, the next mechanism that is often talked about is collaborativeware. So those enable multi-authoring. I think that's in Google. I don't use Google, we use Microsoft Office. But Maureen, do you see teachers enabling collaborative function? CJ or Donald, do you want to comment on collaboration within platforms?
Yeah, I also use Google, and this has saved us a lot. Right now, unfortunately, like I'm part-time science teacher, and I do a Google Doc with my kids. They do their warm-ups and they use it over and over again, and I can leave notes and comments and we can have our own conversation. So if there's an issue or something, I don't have to call them out in front of class. There's no embarrassment. Like, we keep it private, we keep it to ourselves, and they can learn and grow from it. So I love collaboration where, especially within Google, because it's smooth. It's really, really simple. And even Microsoft, like Microsoft Teams, as a staff, we use that. And it helps a lot for collaboration.
Okay, awesome.
I mean, collaboration has been a huge move just in person classroom instruction over the last decade or so. In the area of technology, we've used the Google Jamboard, Google Docs, and Sheets and stuff for them to do that. But honestly, there's needs beyond that, like laboratory simulation software, done independently. But if we could do groups where the groups can collaborate within the software itself. Desmos is a very popular tool used by my math teachers over this past year, which is a great online platform. But once again, there's interaction between teacher and student that the teacher can then present. But building in something student to student where they can work in groups, much better. It's limited in Desmos to certain activities, but this is an area that definitely is ripe for expansion.
And Donald, I
Okay.
piggyback on what you said. We're learning that we need to go so much more and not just do student to learner interaction, but get that learner to learner interaction taking place. And I know, Zach, maybe you can speak to how our teachers do that, because it's been a real focus. And especially during the pandemic, when some of the kids just didn't have the opportunity to interact or work in groups. It's been really challenging, but interesting to find ways to get students to interact.
Absolutely, and I think one of the strong points of our commercial grade or professional grade LMS is that we can embed some of these third-party applications into it to add that collaboration and keep it in-house. I think we've talked about this a little bit throughout our discussion here. Even you saw with the blogging is keeping that protected and moderated, and that collaboration needs to be obviously protected. But I know with our teachers are able to post announcements and forums and things like that where students can collaborate, but they can also embed third-party applications too, which is a really nice feature. So here you can see this is where collaboration could occur between students and with each other. But then if you have teachers that like to use Padlets like this, for instance, they can embed this into our software to keep it in-house. Their students don't have to actually go to Padlet. They can actually respond right within our software and program, which is a really nice feature. We also use Microsoft Word too. Our instructional staff uses Microsoft Word products. And here I'll just show you a OneNote that our teachers create where students can go and collaborate on things. They can get workbook pages and work on this together. And we can embed this and put this into our program for our students, which is a really nice option. It allows students to collaborate together and kind of, open up the doors of that collaboration for them.
Okay, perfect. I liked all those comments, and Donald, I made some notes about what you said as well, and also you, Zach, because I think the operative thing that schools are going to need to be looking at is it moderated, is it protected? Because if kids can just upload any old thing, we're in danger. So yeah. All right, I'm going to Courseware, and Zach, I think you share a screen on Courseware before I take back the screen.
Sure. Courseware for us is, Courseware is, really where all the magic happens, right? For in our LMS and for our students. You go ahead and share the same screen here, and just kind of give you a picture of what Courseware might look like. Let me show you. So in our course delivery system is what the term that we use, but this is where students are interacting with all of the learning objects is what we term them as. And so a student will go through the essential instruction. They'll move throughout all of those different learning objects based on completion. So we get gating in there as well, but they're going from essential instruction to the videos, the textbook, and the software is really managing them through that and getting them to the assessments that are preloaded. We want to talk about where those mechanisms where software is assisting and the efficiency for educators. All this is kind of built into our courseware, and where students can navigate through it themselves, and it's kind of auto-directing them through. So very nice features here.
Okay, perfect. And so I just want to turn back to Donald and CJ about courseware versus repository systems where the teacher does all of the build-in.
We use courseware, and only my math teacher uses a repository. He uses Google Classroom, but everyone else uses courseware. And it depends on the needs of the kids, and it depends on the style of the teacher. I'm lucky because we're a charter. We can do what works for us. We don't have a lot of red tape to figure out what needs to happen in a classroom. So as a principal, I allow that freedom, because when the teachers are comfortable with it, they help the students get comfortable with it. So I allow both in the school.
Okay. My reality on this, and Donna, I didn't mean to cut you off on your comment, but my reality is that a lot of school teachers are not necessarily using this advanced courseware, mostly because they don't understand what it's doing, and they're used to building all their own digital lessons. So if they think about other software, they think about only two areas, apps that do widgety little things like run a calculator, or show you how to do the alphabet and play, or stuff, like this kid needs more help. Let's put him in the software over here. Maybe he'll get helped. Donald, do you have any comments on that? What are you seeing in your district? I don't know.
Well, I think it's a matter of trying to move that way, but slowly. Like, we were caught in the pandemic. We left thinking we were coming back in a few weeks and didn't come back the rest of the year. We didn't have one-to-one devices. So the teachers were just given what they either found online and could get for free, or what the district solely brought to them. So first we had to get devices to people. We got them to students, and we had teachers that didn't have them, and internet connections. And then from there, we went to what digital things we could do. But Google Classroom was the big thing we jumped to because we already had that. We just weren't using it much. And that became the big thing. And now we're looking for stuff more like this.
Okay.
But we're not there anywhere close yet.
Okay. I understand. It's a maturity scale kind of a thing, I think. It's like, first, let's just get this handled, and then it's like, okay, we could do better. This could be better. Okay, good. Thank you for that comment. Okay, so I'm going to move on to device input or probeware. These are not something that we probably need to get really deep into, but Donald, you might be familiar with these because they're like, you know, USB port plug-in microscopes, temperature takers, you know, the little wind instruments from various different science lab companies that kids use, the device input or probeware. And a lot of times it comes with software that allows you to do things like measure acceleration and all these other things in this definition. Is there anything you do here that you can think of with this definition? Okay,
No, I
going
think
once,
it's pretty
going
good.
twice.
It's good for what we've been using, the Pasco and so on.
Vernier. Okay.
Yeah, we use
Yeah.
we use Pasco, we use Vernier in some schools.
Okay. Use address the need to protect intellectual property rights of specific content. So, for example, when you download a book from Amazon, you can't edit it, but you can view it and use it and see it. Oftentimes, when we're using baseline suites, not necessarily protecting intellectual property. Do we need to do anything with this definition?
I would just like to comment that this is interesting to me. Years ago, there was a company, this was before Common Core. They were selling a textbook series in math where you could put the chapters together. You could select chapters you wanted, you could put them in certain orders, and they would produce an actual textbook tailored to the request system. We never went that way. But now when you think about it, with the power of these digital textbooks now, this idea could be, it could be really well managed and usable and user-friendly.
Yeah, I agree. So thank you, Donald. You're right. I think they were called Tech Book, weren't they? I don't know if they're still around, but you're totally right. This is to reduce the load. So all things that are mechanisms or pre-bundled content, I consider sort of in this mechanism world. And then CJ, why don't you pipe up too, that we need to do something about what you just said for a definition of tech book.
Yeah, I was thinking about it. I don't, and that's always been a problem for us, just delivering those protected versions. So this one I don't have any suggestions for.
Okay. All right, Wendy, how do you guys handle this over there? Intellectual property.
Yeah, and honestly, with it being the professional grade, it's a little bit different. And that we have in our content, I don't know, Zach, if you want to show it, but we have what we call a quote unquote textbook. And what that is a PDF of the content. And then we also have the digital content within the course. So a student can download the PDF and print it if the student would like to interact with it that way or needs to, even for accessibility reasons. But all of that is original and owned by EdisonLearning. So there aren't any issues with IP, but everything's embedded within our platform. So that protects it once it's embedded. As far as, you know, literature is always a challenge, and short stories and such. Zach's showing you our quote unquote textbook right now. And that's in addition to the content. But that way students can go in and pull that down, which I think is a pretty neat feature. Yeah.
Okay, good. I'm going to go back to next definition. The next one is formative assessment. I think we kind of all know what that is, but in a mechanized way, formative assessments normally are pre-built. You know, they're put into the system. So in other words, a formative in a mechanized system is going to pop up when the student completes then here's your, read this, do this now. Teacher says, okay, now over here. It's embedded normally. Anything we need to do with this definition, anyone? Hopefully you can read it on my.
I'd just like to comment, combining this with I forget the name of it, the cohorting above. I mean, we recently got something in mathematics for this, but only for certain grade levels, where it's adaptive assessments, and then kids are given individual learning paths based on the results of those assessments. And we're using it strong. We're planning to use it strongly this year to deal with. They keep using the term learning loss, but it's really, to me, not lost. It's missed learning that they never really got that they would have normally have gotten. But combining this with the cohorting above, you could open some powerful avenues. It's just having the right platforms to do it.
I think one of the things that that we use it, like in the mechanized way that you brought up, LeiLani, is that we also use it in RTI as well. So we can, from the software side.
Can you share screen? Can you share screen right now? Go ahead.
Not yet, but as soon as Doug gives me, yep, there we go.
Yeah. Doug is our toggle switch. Okay.
So, as you can see, every lesson will have a formative assessment to it. We call it a lesson assessment. And, that's something that system graded kids will get. And this might be a definition for us to add, but auto feedback, right? They get that immediate feedback, how they did on that assessment. And I do know some places are providing auto feedback, like pre-written auto feedback to specific things, but let me see if I can get what. So this would be like the grade book of, this is a demo student, obviously, but all of these would be formative assessments. And what we can do from the software side is kind of build in those restrictions. If a student fails multiple times in his formative assessments or not, doing well, it could put a restriction on them so that then the teacher can intervene with RTI in that way. So, some of the ways that we would do that, you can see, like here would be the restriction that came up with this student that had failed in those formative assessments or is not doing as well as you've set up as the institution. And you can see here in the back end of our settings, you can, every institution can set those mastery thresholds and the assessment failure threshold. So if they fail once, twice, 3 times, so that's completely personalizable to the student, actually.
Yeah, thanks for sharing that.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
Zachary, we have something for the RTI that kind of identifies and gives individual pathways, like I think this does. Does it cohort kids? Because ours doesn't. Does it cohort kids and allow them some kind of a collaboration if they have the similar pathways that they need addressed, or is it just individual based? Ours is individual based.
Right, and so it is individual based, but there's no auto cohorting mechanism that would, obviously there's manual ways to do it. Yeah, so there's no auto cohorting function as of now, but hopefully the future allows that to happen.
This works, the cohorting thing works well in a blended classroom. I've used it, and what happened was when 3 or 4 students all got themselves stuck on the same formative assessment, they actually make themselves into a cohort. And that's wonderful, because then you've got a group of people who really want some kind of information instead of just, I'm giving it to you and you've got to take it now. So it really puts a little bit more student agency into the system if they're allowed to also have the option to do their own cohorting.
I think
Terry,
what we see is,
Go ahead.
I think what we see is a lot of cohorting happens when teachers get the data, right? When they see the students are, there's failure points, or there's something going, there's a few students that are struggling. They'll reach out to those students. It's very easy with the software. Kind of, the data is very easily accessible. Those students are accessible through messaging and making cohort. We do have teachers doing that often.
Okay, thank you. And thank you for sharing that. I think I'm sharing my screen now on framing next, but before we go on, did CJ want to say anything about assessments other than what you've already said?
No, ma'am, you guys hit it all. Mm-mm.
Hey, okay, great. Moving right along. All right, so framing, the work of setting up the learning sequence by establishing its parts first, then backfilling the full information for the lesson in a system. I'm not terribly familiar with the every single LMS. Does this definition seem like it fits the bill? Should we move on? I'm going to say yes. Game-based learning or gamification, obviously super hot. Wendy, can you talk about this a little? Because this is becoming something that we see the commercial side selling, like what, a 2 billion pop-up last April?
Yeah,
What's
it's
this
wild.
in learning? Yeah.
Yeah, it's wild. And I know, LeiLani, I think you did some research about the parent market and the parent market wanting commercialized products. And so this is where we're seeing a tremendous amount of interest is the game-based learning because of the motivation. And it goes beyond just simple gamification, right? Gamification is where you're just motivating and giving badges, and that's part of it, right? That's one way to motivate students. And I know, Zach, I believe that you can share something on this to kind of demonstrate what we have, but just that level of gamification, getting closer to that commercial grade software so they don't feel like they're just doing worksheets, for example. That is really what the consumer is looking for. And it's really interesting to get feedback and to work with students, because you think that they want, all these really high-tech looking characters, and then when you get into the data and focus groups and you let them look and select what appeals to them most, I mean, we're just old. That's all I can say, right? And they're not interested or in the same things that we are. So it's really interesting, and we try to work with students with focus groups to get ideas of what they would like for gaming and gamification. And I know Zach can share some of that and what the teachers do.
Yeah, I think that's Wendy hit the nail on the head. The teachers love to do this. They know the students, they interact with them, they get what their desires are, what their interests are, and then they can design games. We've had some awesome games designed, and it speaks to the level of, students want to strategize, they want to work together, they want to, they want to accomplish and be competitive. And so our teachers have really put together some fantastic, and I attribute it a lot because they do have the time, because we do have the courseware. They're not creating their own lessons. They're creating RTIs, they're reaching out, they're doing tutoring sessions, and they also have time to make, to gamify lessons for students based on their individual preferences. Some of the things that are.
Do you want to share screen, Zach? On that?
Yeah, sure. And I will share one thing within our kids love. We do gamify our assessments at our middle school levels, and they just love it. And it's super. It's not intense. It's not a huge production, but when they're answering questions, they love this. And I will share that with you. So they can choose between Paintball Blaster and Dunk Tank. And this is just a simple, very simple game where they will answer questions and they get to try to dunk a teacher. Very simple. It's not robust in any way, but if you turn them off, the students will let you know about it, that they want them back on. Because it just does, it brightens their day. I think it adds a little bit of flavor to an assessment that is typically dry. And it excites them. They want to dunk that teacher. And I think it just adds a layer of challenge to it and a little bit of concentration for them.
That's awesome. I'm going to distinguish here, and maybe CJ or Donald or Terry, if you're still on the line, you guys could comment on this. A long form game in gaming vernacular is, like a whole world, and it's got many levels and chutes and ladders everywhere, right? So I think we need to distinguish between short form and long form. Anyone want to comment on that? Because I know that some of the math software looks like long form gaming.
Yeah, I definitely think telling the difference between the two, because when I think about gamifying, when you first brought it up, the first thing I thought of was our use of Kahoot, which is more of the short term with like just a one-time deal. Whereas for our PBIS, we use Classcraft, and that's ongoing all year long, like constantly building, you know, our avatars and our experience level. So yeah, it would be good to tell the difference, because we're like Zach, we just added in some gamification for those dry kind of harder subjects like econ. For a high school teacher, econ is like pulling teeth for a high school kid. But when
Yes.
you add in, you know, platforms like iCivics that can gamify it for you, and then you add on to it, it just brings a whole other light. So yeah, if you add in the short form and the long form, that would help, because they are completely different how you approach them in the classroom.
As an econ teacher for many years, I can attest to this. It is like pulling teeth, and gamifying it helps tremendously.
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Okay, all right. And then we'll probably have many years worth of conversations about the efficacy and the rigor and blah, blah, about all that. But for right now, we'll just get through the talk about gaming rewards. The earlier EduJedi were really interested in gaming rewards not having coins, because there has been some areas of the country that resist trying to give students the idea that they're gambling. So just making a note of that. Let's go to gating. We discussed gating a little bit before. Does anyone want to comment first on gating?
I have to jump here on gating, and I know you've heard me say this before, but you know, when you first start in online learning, you don't gate anything, and this is one of those lessons learned, and it doesn't take very long, right? You immediately realize that you need to have gating, because if you don't, the students will not go through and look at the content. They skip to the assessments. And it takes one parent conversation and digging in and looking at the data one time to realize, aha, I'm going to go in and figure out what gating is. I love gating. I know Zach can show an example of that in case people aren't familiar with it. It might be helpful. But you can do it in all kinds of software systems if you design those, and you can do it in platforms too. And it certainly helps the kids be more successful.
Okay, what is gating? Show us, Zach. What is it?
I mean, so you see these check marks, right? And I had, you know, these check marks weren't all there when I first started into this lesson. I had to go through that essential instruction. I had to go through that instructional video. I had to go, and so that's lesson by lesson we do gating, so that we sequence the learning objects, like I mentioned before. We sequence those learning objects, by an instructional designer does that based on what the appropriate way to learn the material is. But then the other part of the gating is going through the course map. So you can see in calculus, it would be pretty important that I don't learn about differentiating inverse functions before I learn about derivatives of composite functions. So I can't click on lesson 4 and go learn about slopes. I have to go through these lessons as they're designed. And these will become available as I pass through all of the learning objects of each lesson and score on the assessment. So all this gating kind of, it absolutely works together. And like I said, from the institutional level, you can set your mastery settings. From the student to student, you can set your restriction settings. So if the student isn't performing up to those levels, it can trigger a response to intervention. And so all of these things work together in this system to help perform that gating function for you.
Okay, so team, looking at the definition, then I'll take back the screen if Doug will give me back screen control. When we look at gating, now that Zach has kind of showed us what we're talking about, gating, it seems to me like the definition's pretty good.
Yeah, we use gating to kind of re-engage our students, especially when we came back into the classroom. So like they were saying, we would, like Wendy had said, we locked down like everything after unit 2. So the kids could do unit 1, but they got to come see a teacher to get into unit 2. And the teacher can check in with them and make sure that they were on track, you know, with their learning. And especially those that are doing some of these assignments from home, you know, we always know that the the temptation to use Google to find everything is there, especially if they're not in front of you. So gating, like I think the biggest thing is people don't use that term. That's because I don't hear that term used very often. So, but the definition's right. Like I think we intuitively use it in order to get our students to engage with us, because they get on a roll, they don't want to stop, and then the gate hits them and they got to come talk to somebody.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's also sort of an issue with different levels of schools. You know, like maybe they want people to zoom ahead. They're totally into that. And then others like, no, we got to keep the group together because otherwise it's going to get out of control, you know? Well, thank you for that comment. Donald, any comments on that? Gating.
No.
Okay, let's go to gesture controls. This is where when you get into gesture control, this is an interesting arena because this is also hits the special needs groups. And not everyone is actually, you know, working on making sure they've got full, you know, special capabilities. So almost running out of time. We're out of time. We've been here an hour and we've done a lot of talking. All right. Any final comments from any of you before I wrap this up and bid everyone adieu for the next event? Thank you guys all for being with us today. Wendy, if there's a last thing you want to say?
I just want to say I love this image. It just makes me want to hop in there and be transported.
Yeah, let's go there. Let's just, you know, get off Earth for a little while because it's a little crazy place. All right, so Activity I-9 is coming up August 27th, the professional grade learning software scene. Like, what is happening out there? Thank you, everyone, for being with us and doing the work of the EduJedi today. See you next time for Activity I-9.